Laura Ingalls Wilder once said, "It is the sweet, simple things in life that matter after all." Laura Ingalls Wilder was born in 1867 in Pepin, Wisconsin. She lived there in a small cabin that her mom and dad, Charles and Caroline Ingalls, had built. When she was 2, they decided to head west, and they moved to Osage Indian Territory, and Pa built another cabin. They didn't realize at the time that they were building it on Indian land, and after about a year, they had to move. But it worked out because the man that had bought their farm in Pepin, Wisconsin, defaulted on the loan, and so they were able to go back to their home. They stayed for 4 more years, and when Laura was 7 years old, they left their home, packed everything that they had in a covered wagon just like this. They moved to Walnut Grove, Minnesota in 1874. They lived in a dugout. It looked something like this. Laura said that if you looked from the backside, looking over, you couldn't even tell there was a house there. It looked like just a little green mound. The creek was where she spent a lot of time and used to catch crawdads. They stayed for about a year, and then several things went wrong. Pa had built a house, and Ma was pregnant, and he owed quite a bit of money. Then Ma got sick. They had a huge crop. He was expecting it to take care of every debt that they had. And then one day, a cloud came, huge and black. They said you couldn't see the sun. It was so dark. Grasshoppers, this is what it looked like in the air. And they stayed for about 3 days, and all you could hear was them. And they bounced on the ground, and when they were done, the ground looked something like that. There was nothing green left. There was no leaf on a tree, not a blade of grass, and the entire crop was gone. Well, with the debt that they had and the fact that the baby had been born and there were bills to pay, Pa accepted a job in Burr Oak, Iowa, to manage a hotel. It was also a saloon, and the girls were not allowed upstairs. They didn't stay long, and when they came back, they came back to Walnut Grove, Minnesota, and built a house. Pa's sister came and visited with them, and while she was there, she asked him, she said, "Why don't you go with us to De Smet, South Dakota, and work on the railroad?" He thought it was a good idea, and since Pa wanted to go west anyway, it didn't take a whole lot to convince him. He went on out and started working. He was the timekeeper. And Ma and the girls took a train. It was the first time Laura had ever been on a train. They, right here, you can see the train. While they were there, winter hit, and it was bad. It's on record in 1880 as one of the worst winters ever in the Midwest. From October to March, there was a blizzard that averaged every 3 days. The train could not get through. People died. They starved. But from October until May, the train didn't get through. Every time they would get it dug out, it would snow again. They stayed stuck where they were. People did everything they could do. Seeds that they had put up for the next year's crop, they ground in a coffee grinder and made bread just so they could eat. It was a really rough winter. When Laura was 16 years old, she got her teaching certificate, and her beau at the time, Almanzo Wilder, would pick her up and bring her home on the weekends. They married when she was 18 years old, and about a year later they had a daughter. They named her Rose. The prairie rose was one of Laura's favorite flowers, and that's where the name came from. About a year later, they had a little boy. He only lived about 3 days. The house burned down, and they got really sick. All these things happened at one time. Manly, that's what she called Almanzo, had a stroke, and he walked with a limp the rest of his life. They moved to Florida for a little while for his health, but that didn't help. Finally, they decided, we're going to have to leave if we're going to make it. And they went to Mansfield, Missouri. And Manly built her the house of her dreams. He built it from everything on the farm. She wanted 3 big rocks for her fireplace, and he said they were too heavy and it wasn't happening. She tried everything. She begged, and she said when everything else failed, she cried, and she got the rocks for her fireplace. She didn't write the first book until she was 65 years old. It just proves that you're never too old. She didn't dress like we do. She didn't eat like we do. She didn't type on a computer. She lived without television and running water and electricity during the time of her childhood. When she was 65 years old, she wrote her first book, and 7 more. And for the first time in her life, she didn't have to worry about money. I think when she looked back on the fact that she had buried her little brother, that she'd buried her own child, she meant what she said. It was the little things that mattered, the simple things that were important.